I am Ruth Burke. I'm the Executive Director of the Board of Cooperative Ministries. And this is Welcome to Advanced Zoom Training. Let me just give you sort of a couple housekeeping things for the moment. You may see a little, looks like a word bubble down at the bottom of your screen or in your control panel that says chat. And it may have little notifications on it, sort of like on your phone. If you click that, a chat box should either pop up in the middle of your screen and you can move it. You can just grab it with your mouse and move it over out of your way, or it may appear on the right side of your screen. For me, I'm using the Zoom application on my computer and the chat box is on the right side of my screen. And you'll see we're going to be using the chat box today as our Q&A. So when you have questions, I'm still expecting probably 5 or 7 more people to join us. So when you have questions, as you think of them, just go right ahead and put your question in the chat box. And Austin and Hannah are here with me from BCM, and they're going to be monitoring the chat. And we'll have an opportunity to make sure we answer everybody's questions, because that's mostly what we want to do today is get to the specific questions that you might have about the context in which you're using Zoom. So another tip or trick is you may have in the top right corner, if you're on a computer particularly, it says speaker view or gallery view, and that lets you flip back and forth between how you see the screen. If you select gallery view, you'll see everybody on the call or everybody who has their video on. If you click speaker view, you'll be in one or the other. It'll show the other one, whichever one you're not in, it'll show as your option. So that can be helpful to understand the difference between the views. I usually, when we're in if it's a meeting like, say, my church Unity is going to have essentially what's a prayer meeting tonight on Zoom. Having it in gallery view is kind of nice because you can sort of see everybody that you're with in your meeting. You may also want to keep it on speaker view for this meeting, since this is really more like a webinar. And then you'll see the person who's talking. You know, that's the big screen you'll see. Like right now, it ought to be all Ruth if you're on speaker view. And at some point, I will probably share my screen in this meeting. And when I do that, that moves everybody to a little box on the right, and you really won't see everybody anymore, maybe not even me. If you get lost, if you go down to the very bottom of your screen, you should see a little box with a little white camera. It's like a little blue box with a little white camera. And that's how you can find your meeting again. Sometimes people get lost and like, where'd the meeting go? But if you go down, it's back down to the taskbar on your computer where all your applications that are open are. That's where it ends up if you need to find it. So that's just a little bit of navigating the meeting environment for you. If you want more of that kind of information, I recommend that you watch the rerun of the webinar we did last week, which was more of a beginners meeting, how to host a Zoom meeting for beginners. We'll touch on a lot of that kind of stuff today, but I'm going to be talking about a couple different things. But to start with, let me just read for you parts of our daily text. Like, let's just breathe a minute here. Wednesday, March 25th. That's right. It is Wednesday, right? You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay? Shall the thing made say of its maker, he did not make me? Or the thing formed say of the one who formed it, he has no understanding? That's Isaiah 29. O wind of God, come bend us, break us, till humbly we confess our need. Then in your tenderness, remake us, revive, restore, for this we plead. All of you must clothe yourselves with humility. 1 Peter 5:5. O Jesus, my Lord, forever adored, my portion, my all, at your holy feet, humbly pleading, I fall. And the prayer, humble Master, there is nothing we can do to earn salvation. Therefore, take away our pride and false security so that we may humbly trust in your guidance and care. Shape us into who you would have us to be. Amen. It's nice to see everybody's faces. I think we've got some folks from both the Southern Province and the Northern Province, so we're connecting in lots of different ways these days. I mentioned this to a few folks who may not have been, who are already here, but I have the power as the host to mute everybody. And that's what I'm going to do. And you should always feel free to do that as the host too. sometimes, especially when you've got multiple people, it can get overwhelming, and whoever's talking will overrun the person who was talking before. So you can't really do, it's hard to sing on Zoom. It's hard to play instruments separately together on Zoom because it's a meeting software. So, you know, as soon as someone else starts talking, it's going to cover up that, you know, whoever was talking before. And that even applies to if you don't mute yourself when you're in the meeting and you decide to take a phone call, it's going to be what everybody hears. So, you know, even if your host doesn't mute you, it's helpful to go ahead as the host and mute everybody when the meeting starts and just let them know. Now, I have a setting set to be able to allow you all to unmute yourself. So at some point, if we need further information from you about your question, or you want to offer something, you can unmute yourself. But I can also, as the host, click a button or uncheck a button so that I'm the only one who can unmute you. So just be aware that you can also do that. So that's a little something about how we'll go. But like I said, if you would just put your question in the chat box, and then Hannah and Austin are helping me monitor that so we can be sure and get your question answered. But what we're going to talk about today, and Hannah just put it into our chat box. So if you scroll back up to your chat box a little bit, you'll see it says session outline for today. I'm not really using a PowerPoint today because I just want you to see the meeting environment as it would be, say, if you were doing like a Bible study or a board meeting or some other kind of thing that's not really like a webinar. But we're going to basically talk about Zoom account management. We're going to talk about meeting management and troubleshooting, communicating about Zoom to the people you want to be in your meeting, and then resources. But before we get started, I do have a little poll for you because I want to get a little more understanding of what it is that you might need. So I'm launching a poll, and as the meeting host in my control panel, I have a section that says polls. You probably don't have that, but that means that I can actually launch the poll, and it should pop in front of you as a screen. And then you can scroll through the questions, there are only 2, and answer those. And I can see, as the meeting host, I can see as people are answering, the answers are coming in. I can't see like what Janji's answer is, but I can see that people are filling in their answers to the question. So it's anonymous. And that's kind of useful to know. This could be a good tool if you're trying to do with something with a board meeting and you maybe need to vote, and you know, it's not important to know who's voting what, but you want to do sort of a, you know, an anonymous poll of folks or see where they are. I created this poll in advance, which I can do in the back end of Zoom, but I can also create the poll on the fly. So if you had a vote come up with a motion that you wanted to entertain, you can literally go to the polls section of Zoom and create that question on the fly right there in Zoom. I don't know if you guys see, I have a little clock on my poll that says how much time has passed. Do you see that? Just nod. You don't see any. A timer. Okay, there's no timer. So on my end, I see the timer. It's been 1 minute and 11 seconds since I gave you the poll. So it looks like 15 of 18 of you have answered the questions. See, I can see how many have voted. So I'm waiting on you 3 who are either still looking for your poll in front of your page or just being difficult because that's what you do, or you don't want to participate. But I'm going to give you a couple more seconds here and clean my glasses while the last couple of you participate. You can actually get a report in the back end of Zoom if you want to look at these results later. So we can look at them now, but we can also, as hosts, look at the results later if we wanted to collect other kinds of information for use later on. Okay, so I'm going to close down polling. And now it's gonna process, and then it gives me a button that says share results. And it also gives me a button that says relaunch polling. So if I get somebody who goes, oh, I didn't vote, I can relaunch it and go back to the questions. But now I'm gonna click share results so that we can all see what everybody said. So we can see that most folks are thinking about using Zoom or using Zoom for meetings, like board meetings and committee meetings. Some are contemplating fellowship kind of gatherings or book studies, small group kind of stuff. Some are thinking about worship, and it has been used effectively for worship, and I think could also be effectively used for things like Holy Week readings and other kinds of services besides what we traditionally think of as Sunday worship. And then pastoral visits. I talked to Chad Snyder yesterday. He's the assistant pastor at Calvary. He said he's doing a lot of Zoom tutorials with people, and he's taking the opportunity while he's doing those tutorials to do a pastoral visit with them on Zoom as well, which I think is a very creative use of his time, right? What aspect of Zoom is most difficult for you? I see meeting management is a big one. And so we will spend some time on that. So see how that's a helpful way for me to get a good sense of what it is you all need in this meeting. But it can be useful in a number of other ways too, and sometimes used just for fun. So I'll get rid of the poll, move it out of the way. Hannah, are there any questions that you think we aren't addressing in our so far as yet you see popping up that you're not sure we're addressing in our outline for today? I'm just going back through the chat to make sure.
No, they were asking more things about the poll, like how do you set it up?
Okay. Yeah, and I'll show you that in a minute. I'll show you how you can set the poll up, either in advance. During the meeting, it's harder to show you because when I share my screen, it doesn't show you what I see, right? So that gets a little hard in terms of teaching Zoom. The other thing I was going to say, which was what? Okay. We do plan to share with you afterwards. The nice thing about, you'll notice you registered for this meeting, which was different from last week's Zoom. If you did last week's Zoom webinar, you really just received a link to go into the meeting. This time you had to go into an online form and fill out some information. But the nice thing about that is, as the host, then you can see their information, and you can actually ask, get their email address, ask some custom questions if you wanted ahead of the time for the meeting, which is useful. And then that also means that I can send you directly the resources used in the meeting after the meeting, right? I realized after we did last week's meeting where we had 60 some people online that I hadn't captured anything about any of those folks to be able to communicate directly with them later. So depending on what you're doing, it's useful to use the registration, option functionality. But we will have a printed, I'm working on it now. It's a printed document that'll have a lot of links from Zoom itself that I think are handy for people. There's a lot of information on the zoom.us website. I mean, it's overwhelming. And of course, Zoom has functionality primarily for corporations. So a lot of what we're doing is really kind of at the lower end of the level. So there's a lot of information out there that doesn't really apply to the kind of thing we're doing in our accounts. So we're trying to curate that for you. So we'll send you that as a PDF document you can click on. And then we'll also send you the recording of today's webinar so that you can watch it again if you need to. So you'll be getting those resources from us. I also have a printed resource that I gave out in the first session that's for you to give to people who are Zoom newbies. And we'll also share that again with you so that you can just share it. It's something we copied from the internet. I mean, it's not something we created, but there are a lot of good resources already out on Google. Sometimes though, you'll run into ones from an older edition of the software. So you have to be careful about just picking stuff up off the internet. But if you can find 2 or 3 really good things that'll work for you, I just recommend you stick with those. Let me see where I am. Okay, I think we can move. We'll talk about a little bit about Zoom account management. And this can get confusing because you really have users and then you've got settings, right? And for users, there are several layers to that. So you've got users and then you got roles. So that's confusing as well. For our purposes though, and what Moravians are going to be doing, we're not as concerned about roles. Most of us may purchase a paid account. And for the purposes of this meeting, I'm assuming everybody's going to have a paid account. And I would say it's worth getting a paid account. It enables you to do some things you just can't do with the free account. So I'm assuming that most people here are what we call pro users, and that's a licensed user, meaning they paid, but it's sort of the basic level. And that allows you to host meetings up to 100 people. You can purchase add-ons through Zoom. There's a lot you can do additionally to that. It'll give you a second sort of permanent office space on Zoom, which is helpful. Gives you like your own private office that you can, you know, I want to have a quick meeting with Marie. I just shoot her my private office Zoom link and we just have a little quick meeting without having to schedule things and set up bunches of settings and stuff. So it's having the personal meeting ideas handy. You should know though that you can't have 2 meetings simultaneously. So say you have 1 user account, it gives you a personal meeting room. But if you had a Bible study scheduled, you can't hop on your personal meeting room while your Bible study is going. It doesn't allow, you know, simultaneous meetings. You'd have to have a separate user. So we went ahead, BCM went ahead and purchased a second paid user account for Hannah, because that means that Hannah and I could both be having meetings in 2 different places at the same time, basically. So I think of your user account, your pro user account, as sort of a channel. It's really a channel for you, but you can't do multiple things at the same time on your channel, if that makes sense. As you think of questions, put them in the chat box, and when we get through the user section, we'll go back and make sure we've answered all those questions. You may have questions about the application versus the browser, and this trips people up a lot of the time. Zoom is a very robust program, and it is easy to get on an iPad or a tablet or a cell phone, a smartphone. You just have to go to your Play Store or your Apple Store, App Store, and download the Zoom app. And then people can join from anywhere, wherever they are. All they really need is either the link or I think it's a 9-digit meeting ID, and they can join the meeting. On computer, there is also an application, and you can go to zoom.us/download. You do it on the device you want to download the application on, and it will walk you through downloading a separate client application for your desktop. That really is the best in-session experience, is having the app even on your computer, on your desktop computer. But you can, in a pinch, and I do it a lot, just click on the link and it'll take you right to the meeting in your browser. When it comes time to start using your settings as a user, that is easier done in your browser. So, but just know, for a while I was actually confused, because I'm like, I saw 2 little icons down below. I had like a Zoom login page and I had like my Zoom meeting, and I realized that I was not using my application. And so my application was popping up when I started a meeting, but I wasn't going to the application, I was going to the browser. So that can be kind of confusing. If you see 2 Zooms at the bottom of the screen, that means you're using the browser probably rather than the application you've downloaded. It just takes time to get used to all the variations here. One question I had in the meantime since our last webinar was about the physical location. So I had someone who said, I'm going to create this account at the church, but I'm going to use it at home. Well, keep in mind, Zoom is a web-based program. So as long as you have your username and your password, all you really need is access to the internet to be able to get on Zoom from wherever you are. So you could be at your daughter's house and log into Zoom and use it there on her computer. As long as you've got your username and password, it doesn't matter where you are. I had somebody else ask me, their computer at the church is so old, it doesn't have a webcam. You don't need a webcam. You really just need a connection to the internet. I mean, you would appear on the screen sort of like maybe you see Austin Craver, where it's just his name and he has no video on, but he should still be able to, as long as you've got speakers and a mic, you can still either listen or talk or both. So, you know, there is a lot of flexibility. People can even call into these meetings on a landline. They should just be aware that they might incur some toll charges if they're calling long distance, you know, depending on how their phone service is set up. But even someone, an older person with a landline who wants to get on your prayer meeting, all they need to do is call the numbers that they'll receive. So, so there's lots of different ways to engage Zoom. As a host, I think ideally you've got to have a desktop set up, and you've got to be able to do it on your desktop to be able to do all the settings. Let me see. How am I doing? Yeah. So a basic user can host meetings with up to 100 participants, but it will time out after 40 minutes. So if you've got a free account and you want to keep using it and you can keep your meetings to under 40 minutes, you don't want to record them, go for it. Use the free account. If it kicks everybody off at 40 minutes, you'll have to restart the meeting or go in and create a new meeting to start another 40 minutes. So, but like I said, I'm assuming most folks are going to be willing to pay the 15 bucks a month for a paid account. Not everybody on the meeting has to be a paid user, okay? You don't even have to have an account on Zoom to join a meeting. All you need is a link, is the meeting link. But it is helpful. For example, we have a shared account with several different agencies throughout the church. So I think we have 7 users on our account. Everybody is paid in order to be able to do things like co-host a meeting, schedule a meeting, do all those kind of things. So, but so you might want to, it was really helpful for us to have shared this joint account when this whole crisis began. I share also with Justin Robick from Moravian Church Without Walls and the Board of World Mission. And so we were able to together purchase the webinar capabilities, which suddenly we needed. We didn't really need them before, but suddenly we needed them, and it gave us a more robust account. So there may be times when it makes sense to go in with a group of churches or a group of people to purchase the account together and then set up a bunch of users who all have their own channels, if that makes sense, to be able to schedule meetings. So at the district level, that may make sense, or the, you know, at the provincial level, or if you're working with a cluster of churches or people, it may make sense to have multiple paid users using the same account, if that makes sense. If you're a paid user, meaning you're paying the 15 bucks a month, it's 12 and change a month if you just go ahead and purchase the whole year. It's really a bargain. It's about 150 bucks a year to have a paid user account. Like I said, you have that separate personal meeting space that has the same link every time, in addition to your channel that you can schedule meetings on. You can record to the cloud, meaning you won't be taking up space on your hard drive to record meetings. They do take up some space, especially if you record the video. It'll enable you to record to the cloud, meaning they'll send you back an email with a link to your Zoom recording and give you some flexibility to do some things with that. It'll allow you to be an alternate host. I know we've had a lot of questions about hosting and how to hand off hosting responsibilities, and we'll talk about that when we look at the meeting settings. And it will also allow you to assign others to schedule for you, which is occasionally really handy. For example, Hannah, I have assigned Hannah as someone who can schedule meetings in my channel for me, and she has put me in as the person who can schedule meetings for her, which is great because as we are piling through here and doing meeting after meeting after meeting, it's like, oh, my channel's busy that time. Let me go over as Hannah and schedule it as Hannah. So there's some, but again, both people have to be paid users for that to work. You can't just designate anybody to be able to do that for you. If it's really just you on this paid Zoom account, then you are basically, your role is the owner and administrator. And as such, you have access to settings that basic users, free users don't have. So I think I'm going to share my screen now to show you some of these settings so you can see them from the back end. Alrighty. And as the presenter, you can actually control screen sharing, and I recommend that you do that as the host. We've learned now that half the world is on Zoom all of a sudden, something called Zoom bombing is happening, meaning if you decide you're going to throw your Zoom link out on your website and say, hey, we're going to have this fun meeting tonight, here's the link, and it's on your website, that means anybody trolling the internet could potentially find your link and hop on your meeting. And if your settings aren't set to control who can share your screen, they can actually take control of the screen and show things that maybe you don't want everybody to see on your screen. It's called Zoom bombing. It sounds like it can be quite traumatic. So you can go in and set it up though once you're in the meeting. Like if I wanted Sheila to share her screen, I can go in as the host during the meeting and allow Sheila to share her screen. So you can still, like, you know, tweak your settings in the meeting, but I recommend that you go on the back end, and I'll show you how to do that. Let's see. Okay, so there's several layers to settings. Like I said, you've got your administrative settings. You've got what I would call personal settings. And then you've got meeting settings, and then participants have their own settings. So there's really several layers to the settings, and that can be confusing. We're still wading through that ourselves. This is the back end of my Zoom account that you're in. You're on my profile page. Notice that I can go in and change my picture, I can change my name. I can actually edit all that information about myself. And a side note there, I had a question from a pastor who's an interim pastor who said, I'm creating this paid account for the church, but eventually I'm going to go on and they're going to need the account. Well, you can go in and change both the username and the password and the email address associated with that user, right? So you can, the program does have the flexibility to allow you to change those things later on. So just be aware of that. You can see here that I'm a licensed user, that we now have the webinar up to 1,000-person webinar capability. We're paying a lot of money right now for Zoom because of that. The webinar is very expensive, and I don't recommend that for folks who are just kind of trying to do things like meetings and worship and stuff like that. You'll notice if you've ever been to the Church Without Walls online worship that happens on Sundays, that is using the webinar capability, and they've had over 300 people join for worship. So there are times, I think if you're working with a really large congregation, it might be useful to have the webinar features, but for most of us, for most of the size churches we're working with, we don't need webinar capability for most church functions. Let me look at, oops. You'll see on the left side, I've got a menu there, and the top it says personal, and then underneath that, the next menu says admin. So I only see the admin settings because I am the owner and administrator of this account. And that's kind of where you'll want to start once you've been thinking through how you want your meetings to go. From this menu, you can do things like, here you can see all the users on my account. And I can do things like upgrade people to a licensed account or make them a webinar user or any kind of stuff like that. So this just issues an invitation. So say maybe you're at a church where there are 2 pastors and you both want to have a paid account. Once you've created the account, you know, Janji could just go into the user management, invite Adam to be a paid user, you know, licensed user, and then Adam has to go on his computer and answer the email and click confirm, and then he would be added as one of the paid users. So it's just invitation and acceptance process there. I haven't messed with group management. I don't know what that does, so we're not going to mess with that. And role management is not so important when you only have 1 or 2 people on your account, so that's not a big deal. Room management, this is for administrative stuff, and it's really more for corporate conference stuff. So I haven't messed with room management at all. Account management is where you go for things like, you know, changing your account profile, looking at account settings, billing, printing off an invoice if you need to you should turn that in for reimbursement or something. You can do that here in the billing section. It tells you and gives you places where you can download things. But let's go back to account settings because that's really what you care about the most. And this is like what I would call global settings. So it's global settings to the whole account. But then as a person, when your personal settings and your personal user settings, you can tweak those a little bit. So you do have some flexibility in your personal account. But you can determine, for example, whether or not you want to have your video on when you start the meeting. You can determine whether or not you want your participants to have video on when they start the meeting. Sometimes it's nice just to be able to turn that off so that because people can get on the meeting and they're not ready to be on camera, right? They're still doing some other things. So sometimes it's handy to be able to turn that feature off. You can determine upfront whether you want people to just use their computer audio settings or if you want them to be able to call in on a cell or landline. I have our settings set to be able to use either or. I'm just trying to create as much flexibility for people to be able to get on the meeting. Join before host. This is simply do I want Marie and Yvette and Tim to be on before I get on as the host? I would do it, I'd say different ways. For a more formal meeting, I would say, no, you don't want to do that. But for maybe an informal meeting, sure, let them get on before you get on. What I have noticed sometimes happens though, is once people figure that out, they'll get on beforehand and have their own meeting on your channel. So I have it turned off just as a general rule, because I think it's easier just to wait until I get there for the party to begin, right? But you can, if you want to just take I would just say, you know, go into the back end of your account, go to the account settings, and just take a look through all of these. It's quite a lot of stuff. You'll notice I have a lot turned off. I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. Trying to go to one that might be more. Mute participants on entry. That's another one that's pretty important, because you might hear a lot of extraneous stuff that you don't need to hear, or people won't realize they're on the meeting and they might say things they shouldn't say. So that one's a good one to have. You'll notice I don't have that turned on, but I can control it when I schedule a meeting as well. So I can go in when I'm scheduling a specific meeting and say, I do want to mute my participants as they come on. You can turn on meeting reminders for yourself. Then it goes into the in meeting, what you can do in your meeting. You can determine whether or not you want them to chat with each other. You know, Hannah and Austin are probably having a very vigorous private conversation that none of us are aware of in the chat box right now, because they can privately chat because I have it enabled. But you can turn that off so that they can't do that. I don't really think it makes one difference one way or the other. You just have to be careful that you use the drop down in the chat so that you don't think you're privately chatting someone and you're accidentally broadcasting to everyone. That might not be good. So it goes through a lot of things. Here's an important one, co-host. Allow the host to add co-hosts. I would definitely enable that because it is helpful. Even if they're not a paid user on your account, say I had a family emergency and I needed Yvette to take over the meeting for me, I could actually now in the meeting select a menu item that says make Yvette host of the meeting, and then I can leave the meeting. Because right now, if I'm the only host, when I leave the meeting is over and everybody is bumped off the meeting. So it's important to keep in mind, if you're the host of the meeting, that you're going to want to always have either a co-host who's, like I said, a paid person, maybe that you designated ahead of time, a paid account person, or in the meeting on the fly, determine who's going to be your host. I made Hannah a co-host of my meeting once I got into my meeting, so she can do all the things that I can do as the host. So that's handy to be able to do that. So I highly recommend that. Allow hosts to put attendees on hold. I think also a really good thing for hosts to be able to do, if you have a host who needs to be maybe temporarily removed from the meeting for whatever reason. It may be because, you know, I don't know if you've seen it going around on Facebook, but there's a Zoom meeting going around on Facebook where one of the women took the computer into the bathroom with her and actually sat on the toilet. Yeah, and it's all on the Zoom meeting because she forgot. I mean, people are so new to this, you know, forum, they're just not used to. So that would be a time when, as the host, you would want to stop her video or remove her from the meeting, right? So anything can happen, folks. It's the Wild West out there. But this gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things. Okay. Screen sharing, here's where I was talking about the Zoom bombing. You can determine who can share. Right now I have my settings to host only can share, and then in the meeting I'll decide if I want someone else to share their screen with us. There's just so many things that may or may not be important. Now we're into advanced settings. One advanced setting you might be interested in is the breakout room functionality, and I would turn that on because I think that's useful. Say you were going to do a joint board meeting and then you wanted to break out into trustees and elders. You can use that breakout room functionality, and you'll see there's an extra check mark there. Allow hosts to assign participants to breakout rooms when scheduling, which is very handy. If you know who's going to be on the call, you can pre-assign people to breakout rooms, or you can do it on the fly. You can, in the meeting, click the breakout room, you know, button, which you'll have as a host, And you can say, okay, I want John and James and Eric to go to this room, and I want these guys to go to this room, and then you can send everybody to their separate rooms. It's very handy. You can also just do it randomly and just randomly assign people to small breakout rooms if you wanted to do, say you were doing a small group study and you wanted to have time for people to talk about a question in smaller groups. You could just randomly send people to breakout rooms. But that's a pretty cool functionality for meetings and things. So I just want to make sure you saw that. Let's see, you can do closed captioning as well in the meeting. It's a very interesting functionality. They can integrate it with a third party. I have not found a free third party closed captioning company, but say you had maybe a 90-year-old guy in your board meeting who just can't hear well, you could actually assign someone else in your meeting the job of providing closed captioning, even if it's maybe, say, just a summary of what's being said on the screen. They can type it in real time. You know, they can transcribe in real time. You know, so even if they're not getting like the whole paragraph that that person just said, they can at least be typing in things like, Ed agreed with the basic motion. You know, just, you know, they can just provide general direction. But yeah, you can just pull up closed captioning in your meeting and then say, I want Hannah to run the closed caption. As the host, you're not going to want to try to transcribe while you're running the meeting, but you can assign it to someone else in the meeting, which is kind of cool. Let me see if there's anything else that I need to really talk about right now. Not really. Those are, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of stuff here. You can go through and just scroll through everything and then go into the Zoom customer service section and search some of the language if you're not sure what it is. Like I said, a lot of it won't really apply to us because it's sort of a higher level of functionality at the conference room level in a corporation. But some of it is important. So those are account settings. Like I said, those are global. So if, say, Adam and Janji and the secretary at Friedland all were paid users on their Zoom account, the owner of that account, let's say it's Janji, if he's the owner of that account, he's the one who would have these admin settings, and he would go in and make global changes for everybody that way. But Adam, if he's just a user, he's one of the pro users, he's going to have this personal section that's at the top of the menu here, see on the left. And that's where he would go if it was time for him to schedule the elders meeting. So he's going to schedule the elder meeting. He's going to go to his meetings menu. And you'll see here, these are all the meetings we've got coming up just in the next day or two. These are our scheduled meetings. And to schedule a new meeting, you just click schedule a new meeting. And the screen pops up where you can decide, okay, this is going to be the elders meeting. And you'll notice you can determine when it's going to be. Say it's going to be on Sunday at 2 p.m. You determine your time zone here, which is going to be the time zone that you're in as the host, is what I would assume. You can set it up as a recurring meeting. If you're going to meet every month on Sunday at 2, you can put that in just like you would do on your calendar and say, I want to do that 4 times, or, you know, however many times. You can set it up as on the first Sunday of every month. So there you go. You can require registration, meaning you can make people sign up ahead of time. Okay. So it gives you several options. Because it's a recurring meeting, you can make them register for each meeting as it goes, or you can say, I'm registering now for all the meetings. And that's kind of handy because I do think it'll send a reminder. Did you guys get a reminder for today's meeting in your email or not? You did? Some are saying yes and some are saying no. Okay. Here's where, see, even though I've set some global settings for my individual meeting, I still have the flexibility to go in and say, I want the participants' video to be off when they come in the meeting. You know, I'm offering both options for audio. I'm going to let people join the meeting before I do. You know, I'm going to pre-assign the breakouts, and see, you can actually create an Excel spreadsheet and import it into, if you've got like 80 people you're breaking into breakout rooms, you can do it ahead of time and import it in. but it also lets you just create the rooms. Can you see that pop up? Are you guys seeing the pop up on the screen? Okay, good. Sometimes you have to set it in your global settings to allow people to see all of your Zoom windows, or you can't see it. But here's where I'd go if I wanted to manually create rooms with attendees. So, and here's an important one, which I think is good. If you're going to record the meeting, if it's an elders meeting where you're going to be making decisions or 2 or 3 critical people aren't going to be in the room, then I would go ahead and say, yes, I want to record the meeting automatically. Because sometimes as the host, when you hop on the meeting, you may think you're going to remember to hit the record button, but a lot of things are coming at you when that meeting's starting. So it's really easy to forget. And I think it's easier to go ahead and say, yes, I'm going to record the meeting, and then just delete it if you don't need it later, right? Just make, you know, and here you'll see you've got options on the local computer. Do I save it and record it on the local computer or in the cloud? And I always do in the cloud. Because I was at work, I was working on an 8-year-old desktop computer, and it doesn't have very much space for recordings. So I would opt for the cloud. See, here's where it says alternate host. So if Adam created the elders meeting, but he wants Janji to be an alternate host, which is a good idea, and Janji is a paid user on his account, he's going to type John's email address in this box. Like, see, I'd make Hannah my alternate host, and then save the meeting. And then you'll notice it's created, this is the meeting space. It's created the meeting space. There are some cool things you can do. This is on the back end. If I want to go ahead and put this on my Google Calendar, I use Google Calendar myself for all my work commitments. I can go in here and it'll actually take me out and say, let Zoom control your Gmail, and then it will actually create a Zoom event for me. Isn't that nice? That I can go in, make sure it's on the right calendar, because I have a few calendars that I'm running on Google. And I can, when I click save, it will populate the meeting on my Google Calendar for me and include the Zoom link. So all I have to do is click the link to start the meeting. So that's kind of a handy feature. It integrates not just with Google, it also integrates with Outlook if you use Outlook, and now with Yahoo. That just popped up recently. You may have to enable that on the administrative side, but calendar integration is a cool feature for you. The other thing to know, if you are a Google Calendar person and you have a lot of other people who have Google Calendars, is you can really literally invite your people from your Google Calendar. You can say, okay, I want Joy in my meeting and I want Jesse in my meeting, or you can type in their email address, and then when you hit save, Google Calendar will send the invite to the Zoom meeting. And so then everyone will just have all the Zoom information. So that's an interesting little shortcut that you could be using for meetings as well. But say everybody's got a different thing, and some people use paper calendars. So you got to get this information out to them another way. So down here, you'll see there's a registration URL. That's what you're going to want to share with people in order for them to register for your meeting. Now that's assuming it's pre-registered, like you make them register. You can also copy the invitation, which gives you more information. And that's what you're going to generally want to do. When you hit copy the invitation, you're going to get a pop-up screen that's going to give you this is the information you need to send an email asking them to register for the meeting. That makes sense? But I've changed my mind. I don't want it to be a registration in advance anymore. I've decided that's too much. I don't need to do that. So you'll notice down here, you can edit the meeting, which is really nice. Once you schedule the meeting, it's not written in stone until right up until the time the meeting starts. So you can go back into your meeting settings and edit the settings. Because it's a recurring meeting, it's saying, do I want to edit all my meetings or just this one? And I'm going to say I want to edit all of them. So I'm going to go back in, I'm going to make it not be a required meeting. And I'm going to make my video be off. So I've just made a couple tweaks there. I go all the way to the bottom and I save it again. And now you'll notice it's no longer a registration URL, it's now a join URL. And that's just the simple link you would need for people to click on to open Zoom in their browser and join a meeting. But again, what I do typically, once I've created the meeting and it's the way I want it to be, I'm making sure the date and time is correct. I'm going to hit copy the invitation, The invitation information pops up for me. I click copy there. Notice it highlights all the information and it's copied it to my clipboard. Okay, so I'm basically copying and pasting it now. Now I'm going to go into my email, which I use Outlook during the day. And I'm going to create a new email. Are you guys seeing my email? I'm going to send Hannah an invitation to my meeting. And now I'm just going to use my paste function, and I'm going to, you know, paste everything. That's Control V is the shortcut, keyboard shortcut for it. But you can see that I now have all the information about the recurring, the next 4 elders meetings right here in my invitation. I, over time, have taken to editing even the invite so that it's just basic information. So if I were going to be sending this to a bunch of people who've never been on Zoom before, I would probably take out all this recurring information, because I'm just going to send it to them again next week because they're not going to remember to keep this, right? I'm going to make sure that they understand all they have to do is click this link in order to join the meeting. So I'm just editing my email now, basically. I'm getting rid of One Tap Mobile. I think that's an Apple phone thing, but I don't usually include that because that seems to be confusing to people. What I usually say is join the Zoom meeting on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by clicking this link. And then I might mention something like you can download the Zoom app on your, you know, device ahead of time. I mean, you know, you can just basically add whatever instructions you want to add into this thing. And then I'll often just say, or you can join by phone. And I don't usually give them all these phone number options. You can, in your administrative settings, determine how many numbers you want to have available for people. But I usually just use maybe a couple at the top. Now, the people who are dialing in by phone, they're going to need that meeting ID, because it's like any kind of conference call. It's going to say, please enter your meeting ID to join the call. And they'll have to have that 9-digit number to get on just the phone. So I try to just streamline what I send people. Otherwise, it just seems to be like a lot. So let's see. How am I doing here? So we've talked about administrative settings. We've talked about meeting settings. And then I was going to talk about real-time meeting settings, but I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen to do that. Bringing you all back. I see I lost a few of you on. And so then, like I said, so you've got the global settings if you're the owner of the account, you've got the personal settings if you're a pro user, and then you've got settings in your actual meeting that you can actually, you know, do. Like I said, you can manage participants. If you click the participant, you've got a participants button, but I've got a manage participants button. Where I can do things like mute specific people or take off people's videos. I've got specific share settings that I can manipulate. I've got the chat, I've got the polls, I've got the recording. So there's a lot happening, you know, in the meeting. I mean, you may want to just get on a meeting with a couple of friends as the host and just fiddle around with the settings, you know, in just a practice session to just get used to, you know, manipulating the settings while you're in the meeting. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm good for some questions now. If Hannah, I don't know, I know that you guys are probably troubleshooting the chat while I've been talking and talking and talking, but are there questions that I should answer at this point about what I walked through?
We've done a few, but I've been saving a lot of them. Though I don't think Judy is still with us. She wanted to know about music through Zoom. I think that is going to be a Mike question.
Yeah,
Yes.
it depends on, I mean, I think you could, I haven't really tried it too much, but I think like, for example, if John had his guitar and we were all muted and we wanted to let John play a little song, he could play and sing a little song. You're not going to do that, John? Okay. No, but let's say you wanted in the context of your little meeting to have this little song. I think the easiest thing to do, when people start talking or singing together, it's just a jumbled mess. So I would mute everyone on the meeting, unmute John, let John's guitar play, and then let everybody just sing along muted, right? I can hear myself singing, I can hear John's guitar, and that's about it, you know? So that would be one way to do it. I don't know, I mean, Mike Reese is the go-to on any copyright questions.
Yeah,
But
and she
I'm
was
saying
asking about licensing.
licensing. Yeah, see, I don't know. And I would say the only caveat here would be if you're recording the meeting to show later, like put out on the internet, then you got to really be careful about, I think, your copywriting. But if it's a live meeting that when it's over, honestly, I wouldn't worry about that. You know, I mean, it's about the life of it. And if it's going to end up somewhere that someone who's got the copyright to it or who's a licensing agent is going to run across it. I mean, that's the concern. So, you know, if John is going to sing, he's going to sing a Bee Gees song, unless one of the Bee Gees is on the meeting, I don't think you're going to have a problem with your copyright, right? So, you know, if it's worship and it's going to be publicly posted on your website later, then you may need to have a conversation with Mike about the best way to approach copyright for music. But know that Mike tomorrow is doing a webinar on what resources are available. He's working like mad. The IBOC staff has been working like mad to get hymns that are free of copyright and liturgies that are free of copyright restrictions, as well as other resources. Other folks are turning in their liturgies they've written and allowing people permission to use them. So that'll be a good webinar to do tomorrow if you're interested in knowing more about that. And Mike will be available to answer some of those copyright questions on that webinar, which is what time tomorrow? 2 Eastern time?
It's at 2, yes, 2.
It's at 2 Eastern time. You can go to our website and go to the COVID-19 section and scroll down to register for that webinar. It's on there. And it's also was on our e-news if you're subscribed to our e-news. If you haven't subscribed, I recommend you do that. You can go to moravianbcm.org and over to the right, on the right side, there's a subscribe to the e-news. It's called The Essentials. You might want to do that. And then every week we'll be publishing what webinars are coming up. Every week is a new adventure because we don't know what we're going to do next week. This is like happening like this, right? So what else?
So Nicole asked for printed resources, which Nicole, they're from our webinar last week. It's on our website. There's a lot of the printed resources that Ruth mentioned, and then we'll also send out more with this one after it's done. But if you want to just go to moravianbcm.org and under the COVID-19 page, it says how to host a Zoom meeting. And there's the webinar from last week and a ton of resources, everything from information to send out to people trying to join the meeting to even the document about Zoom bombing. So, and then how do you create the poll? Marie asked that.
I'll share my screen with you real quick and show you where that is on the back end. Because I think if you know ahead of time, it's a lot easier to do it ahead of time. So if you click your meetings button to see all of your upcoming meetings, you know, and you know that you want to create a poll. Well, we'll go into the meeting we're in right now. That's a little meta, but if we go into this current meeting, the back end of this current meeting, and you scroll all the way to the bottom of the meeting settings, you'll see, because I had it registration, it pops up sort of the add-ons, right? So there's registration where I can see I had 25 registrants for this meeting. I can go in and customize my email that people get after they register for this meeting here. Kind of handy. I can even set up some branding. You'll see I've got our Board of Cooperative Ministries logo. It will appear on the person's form when they go in to register for the meeting. And then last but certainly not least is the poll. And if I've been, if I'm using the poll, this is where I can go. It says something like create questions now or add questions. But you can see that the poll is now ended, right? And if I'm the owner, if I wanted to get those results, I think I go into account management and go under reports, and I should be able to get my my meeting I can go into my meeting reports to pull up the results of a particular meeting's polls. I know that was a lot, but that's how you do that.
Okay, and then we have, is it important as an admin to use a computer versus an iPad?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think you just have a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can do and being able to get to the back end. We haven't used devices much. I mean, we're mostly using it on laptops and desktop computers. I've used it on the phone a couple times when I was like a participant in a meeting and was out and couldn't be on the computer. But overall, I think the best experience is going to be the computer, if you can be in front of the computer. But as a host, you want access to the back end, and I think you can get some of the settings on the app, but not all the settings.
And then we have one talking about poll settings, that you need to be have a pro account to set up a poll. Yeah. And yes, that is correct. And then Marie asked, is there a problem with two people on their own computer being in the same room for a Zoom meeting? Are you talking about like
if they're two different attendees, but they're on two different devices in the same space? Yeah, that can create some issues. I mean, it can create some feedback and create some audio and video issues. Yeah. Like last night, Chris and my husband and I were both on the same meeting, and he was upstairs in the guest room and I was down here, and we were fine.
Okay. And Judy's questions, I think, were more for Mike, because she was talking about a hymn that she paid for on iTunes and playing it on that. So that is a Mike question. Mm-hmm. And Eric asked, can you add co-host after meeting starts?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very cool. Like I could go up to you, Eric, and you've got a little menu button next to in your space, and it says, do you want to make Eric Elliott the co-host? And I would say yes. Now that might have I don't know what that does to Hannah. No, you're still a co-host too, right? Oh. So now, although wait a minute. Yeah, now I'm the host, Hannah's a co-host, and Eric's a co-host. So now Eric should be seeing some of the host controls at the bottom as well. I don't know if he is or not, but he is.
It looks like he is.
Yeah, I can unmute you, Eric, but you're
okay, good.
Yeah, so and now I can also withdraw my co-host permission for Eric, which I've just done. You can do cool things like make people the spotlight. I don't know, Eric should maybe be in the middle of everybody's screen now, right?
That's right. So
as a host, you can just do a whole host of interesting things there. I'm sorry. How are we doing?
We have, well, it's almost 2, but we only have a few more questions.
I see Leslie's question.
Okay.
About approving people to come in. Yeah, that's a setting on the front end. I mean, on the back end. And I think let me look and see if it's for the specific meeting or, you may have enable waiting room on is what it is. Let me share my screen real quick so I can show you where that is. Yeah, enable waiting room is kind of cool because it does allow you to hold people, so that if you were going to like doing some things you didn't want everybody else in the meeting yet, you're creating your poll or whatever, you can hold people in a certain place. But with the meeting function, it actually means you have to release them one at a time, and that doesn't really make sense. So I'm going into the editing of my meeting. I'm editing this meeting I have set up for tomorrow. And as you scroll down to meeting options, Leslie, you'll see there This is where you'd say enable join host, enable waiting room. And that's, you may have that button clicked. You may also have that button clicked in your administrative account management settings. Let's see if it's there as well. There's so many settings. This was the most confusing part for me, was figuring out what's the difference between the global settings and the private personal settings. And but as I'm scrolling down, there's breakout room. I'm not sure I'm seeing what, oh, there it is, waiting room. So it's in the globals, and see, I have it turned off. So I have to click it if I want to use a waiting room when I create my meeting. So you could go into your administrative settings of for your meeting and turn it off. Then you won't, then you only have to click it if you want to use it. Okay. Now Hannah was prepared to talk some about communicating, and I've done a little bit of that with the email. I showed you copying the invitation. But are there questions related to that as you think about, Hannah can say a few things about that, but be thinking about other things in terms of communicating information about being on Zoom and joining a Zoom meeting to your people. So Hannah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I first want to say that when you're sending out that email or communicating however is easiest to people to join the meeting, it's best to talk to them like they don't know how to use Zoom at all, because that kind of gives them, you give them enough information. I was on a Zoom meeting the other day, and the email was just a link, and so it didn't help for people who did not know Zoom. And with a lot of us, we have at our churches, we have a wide variety of ages, so it can be hard to, you know, explain to them. So the best bet is to give them as much information and they can just kind of scan through it. Another option is to make like tech disciples. If you have some younger people or just some really good technology people at your churches that you think would be really good, you can set them up as like tech disciples, and they can walk people through how to get on Zoom. Obviously not with them. They would do it over the phone or, you know, away. But that's a good option. So if when you're hosting the meeting, you're not worried about troubleshooting the meeting at the same time, because that can get very overwhelming very quickly. So having some tech disciples or just some troubleshooting people on the meeting is very helpful. And another option, which you can send out, especially if they're first-time Zoomers, you can give them the zoom.us/test, and that will allow them to like test the Zoom settings so they can make sure that their video camera is working and their audio is working and all that stuff before actually having, you know, the live meeting. So that's a good option. And you can always set up practice sessions. I offered the other day to a pastor who had never used Zoom that I could, you know, she could go through the whole steps and I could be like her board, be her board, and she could email it to me and I could just make sure she had all the steps and it was making sense. So if you have someone at your church that would be willing to do that, that's a good option to have those practice sessions. And Zoom's troubleshooting is like, their support page is really awesome. And a lot of times if there's a question, I'll just go there myself and kind of find it. They have lots of things there. I have found that the main issue that people seem to run into when they are on a Zoom is their audio settings. So a lot of times, if you can just like walk them through in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little mic. Make sure that you are, you know, it's on the right input option and all that stuff. And if all else fails, close the meeting, start the meeting back, or just turn off your computer and start it back up again, because sometimes that works. Are there any questions about troubleshooting or any that I might have missed in the chat box?
And I'm going to unmute everybody. Look, I unmuted everybody all at once, unless you're not letting me unmute you. And then you have to unmute yourself then, but we can take turns talking.
Oh, Marie said sharing documents on screen. So do you mean like screen sharing or putting documents in the chat box?
Oh, I was really talking, Ruth, last time when you were sharing documents in the first session, I never really figured out how you got them there.
You can do it. I just did it. I just added one in the chat box. So
Yeah,
this
it just came through.
Yeah, this is the one that I was recommending is a really nice primer to attach to emails to send to people. The way I attach that, Marie, let me go, I'm going to share my screen again. It's just the easiest way, I think, to show. Although I'm not sure I can get in the meeting environment. No, let me see if I can pull the chat box up. Okay, do you see the chat box in the middle of my screen?
I do.
Sorry, let me get out of all the other things behind me here. If you'll see down here, is where you type your message. Here it says file. And if you click file, and I don't know if you have file on your computer or not. As a host, I don't know if it's, I thought it was everybody had a file option. I think you might be able to set up, again, in the back end, the options for people to be able to add files or not. But see, I'm clicking file, and then I have the option to pull it from all my different cloud-based systems as well as my own computer if I have a file on my computer.
Okay, I'm set up as a host, but I've never looked for that, so I probably need to do that.
And one other thing to show you while got this on the screen is see the little menu button here. It's like the little 3 dots. You can save your chat. So you saw we were putting some useful links in the chat. And answering some questions. If you click save chat, sorry, it will actually save the chat for you and put it in a folder on your hard drive or in your downloads somewhere. So that it's a text file. It's not pretty, but it does capture everything that gets put in there. What were you saying, Eric? Yeah, the green share is just for video. It's for sharing your desktop, basically. The green share button in the middle of it would be in the middle of your control panel. But yeah, you have to be in the chat box and clicking on file in order to get to attach a file for people to download. That's the first thing I try to tell people when they come to my meetings is you can mute yourself, look for the little microphone button that says mute, and you can mute yourself. A handy little shortcut for people in your meeting, if you press and hold the space bar on your keyboard, you can mute yourself.
Okay. So if you're in a general meeting like this, if you wanted to be heard by everybody, you just talk like in a regular meeting. You don't have to show video. Everybody can see you or not. You're just listening in like the radio. Otherwise, if you don't. But as far as conversation, mostly what we're going to use it for is small group meetings because to keep people from getting together. But we got to conduct business.
Yes.
So as long as it's most of the controls, most of the information is in the administrator's hand. Most of your folks coming to a meeting simply have to talk to the screen.
Right. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is getting used to the muting and unmuting yourself. But it really is very good etiquette to mute yourself when you're not talking, because you just don't ever know when you're going to make noise or when there's going to be noise happening in your environment.
I should do that in more social settings myself. I should just shut up. Yes.
Yeah, that's just some important Zoom etiquette is the muting. And you can, if you press and hold your keyboard, it's a little buggy, but for the most part it works, and it's easier than trying to find your mouse and figure out where to find your microphone to click the mute button. It's an easier shortcut, and then you just click it again to unmute it. So that's kind of handy. What other little things? Yeah, I always say when in doubt, just have them shut everything down. Have them shut everything down on their computer, and even their computer, restart their computer and go back to the email or the place where the link exists and click it and start all over again. It's pretty foolproof. I mean, we used to use, I think it was WebEx we used before that we paid for. It was much more expensive. Some used to go to meeting. And once we moved to Zoom, Zoom is just like more suited for regular old people for some reason. It handles the bandwidth in people's homes better. It provides a more seamless experience. There's less instability, generally speaking. I mean, I can't imagine how many millions of people are using Zoom, and I've been using it for the last, like every day, all day for the last like 10 days. And I've really yet to have any major problems with it at all. It's very stable.
Ruth,
Yeah, Carol.
Dig. Could you just, I'm trying to explain to other people about Zoom, and could you just tell me what I should say very simply to them about what they need to know to get in on it?
To get in on a meeting or to become
Well, I don't think they want an account, but they want to participate.
I mean, I describe it usually as a video chat.
Okay.
You know, it's a video chat forum. It's like FaceTime, except for more people. I mean, you know, if people have iPhones, that's a good way to talk about it. It's FaceTime for small groups and large groups. I also call it a video conferencing, you know, system or platform. You know, I'll just say it allows you to see each other while you're meeting. You know,
what do they have to have on their phone or their computer? Or
I mean, at minimum, really, they want to have speakers on their computer so they can hear what people are saying.
Okay.
It'd be helpful to have a mic, which most computers have an internal mic of some kind. Or you can also buy an external mic. This is a really cool mic. It's called a Samson Go Mic. Got it off Amazon. It's like 3 inches long. It's tiny, but it has very good audio quality, and it's a USB. I just plug it into my computer. I mean, I could be using my laptop's microphone, but this is a lot easier for me. And then when I have because usually I'm doing Zoom in my office, right? I might have 3 other people in my office. So then it has a bit like a 6-foot cord. I just put it out in the middle of the room and it functions as a mic for everybody. So having an external mic is helpful, but the very minimum, Carol, is just making sure you've got an internal mic on your computer. What, Marie?
When we invite people to join who have never done this before, once they click that link, they're going to be asked to download something, right? I mean, it doesn't take long, but just so they're aware that that's going to be there. They need to know that, I think.
Yeah, I often will mention that too. If this is your first time using Zoom, you may be asked to click a link and download a small widget. I call it a small widget because it really is a very tiny program that just enables the Zoom meeting environment to pop up on their screen.
Right.
But most people, I mean, I got my mother's 78, and I sent her a link and she figured it out. So, you know, I feel like everybody can figure it out eventually.
Good.
But Carol, to get back to, so it's a speaker, a mic if you want to talk, and then being able to have a webcam is helpful if you want to be seen on the screen, which as a host, I think you do. But if you're a meeting participant, you know, like, you know, Bruce and Austin have not shown their faces on this meeting. They do not need to because they're just here getting the information. I will say sometimes if videos get unstable, if you're on like maybe at home on internet that might not be a great connection or might not have a lot of download, upload capability, turning off your video is helpful because video takes a lot more bandwidth than audio.
Okay.
So as a last resort, people can just get on without turning on their video. And if they don't have a video camera on their computer, it won't even give them the option.
Right.
It knows that there's no camera. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
What else? Any other questions? Everybody's figured it out, right?
Not at all.
You can only absorb so much.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot. I mean, that's why we recorded it, because you can, if you want to go back and watch it again, maybe something else will pop up for you then that's helpful. And like I said, we'll send you an email with the link to last week's webinar, this week's webinar, the Zoom resources document that we're working on, which is really just a PDF of links to Zoom mostly, but for things that seem relevant to you. And we'll also send you that document that's the primer that I put in the chat, but that's the primer that's a good thing to attach and send to people when you're sending out a Zoom invitation. I'll include that as well. So we'll send you those 4 things. And like I said, you can always email us. If you email us at bcm@mcsp.org, Hannah's going to put that in the chat box. bcm@mcsp.org actually goes to all 5 of us at BCM, Heather, Beth, Hannah, me, and Austin. We all get a copy of the email. So that's if you've got a question, email it to all of us. through the BCM email address, and one of us will get back to you as soon as we can, or send you to the right person. We're happy to help you on the fly as much as we can. And also, like I said, Hannah said, our website is a good resource, and there are a lot of resources on it. You might have to click around a while. We're still trying to figure out the best way to organize ourselves online to be the most helpful, but people are looking for different things. So it varies. I will mention, we're working on a couple of other things. We're working on a live streaming webinar. We've had a lot of questions about live streaming. And I know a lot of preachers especially are trying to sort of catch up there. And I would of course say, don't try to be a live streamer. Having to try to learn how to be a live streamer on top of all the craziness that is happening in the world right now is too much. Unless you've got a guy that works for Microsoft going to your church who can go over and figure it out, which actually we do at Unity. I mean, that's literally true. I would not waste your time trying to get all the equipment in live stream. I would spend your time, if I were a pastor, I would spend my time working on building community in between the Sundays. And reaching out individually to people as much as possible, praying with people. I know people are anxious and they don't know how to even articulate what they're feeling. It's just, right? We all know what that's like, but send them to the Moravian Church Without Walls service, or just do a Zoom meeting and have prayer. I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated. I know people just want to be together in whatever way they can, but there's so many churches out there that already had the live streaming in place, Calvary and Home, and Trinity. They've got it going on, but as soon as one of them gets sick or we're sheltering in place and we can't leave our houses, that's all going to have to change anyway. So I would just say, I would focus your energy on pastoral care as much as possible. But we are going to do a webinar for folks who are trying to work out the kinks of live streaming or using Facebook Live. So look for that. We're going to be doing something with Beth Hayes and some educators on doing family formation at home, faith at home for kids. So that'll be coming out soon. And then we're also working on, Kay Windsor is tomorrow night starting a series on Lebenslauf, on writing your own spiritual autobiography. If you're stuck at home with nothing to do, with lots of time, right? What better time than to write your memoirs, right? Or your spiritual autobiography. So Kay will be doing that, and we'll be rolling out some more spiritual formation, spiritual growth kinds of resources in the next week or two. So subscribe to our e-news and you'll be able to catch all that.
Yeah, Ruth, one of the things that's a concern for our Sunday school is, what's going to happen at Easter, and whether or not we need to send out something special for all the families, or and what would we send, and can we assume that they will do their own Easter celebration? How do we get Jesus into it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I know that I can't keep up anymore, Hannah, with when Beth's webinar is. I think it's next Thursday at 4.
Yeah.
Right? Is that correct? But they are going to be showing some Easter activities that families can do with their kids. So I do know Easter's on the docket. There's some folks developing some godly play videos and some other videos that people can access themselves from their homes. So there'll be some good ideas shared on that webinar, and then we'll have those resources up on our website too. So I know that's happening. I know that we're also working, we've created on the fly this sort of interprovincial digital ministries team. And we're working on developing some Holy Week readings on Zoom. And it's sort of like the Moravian Church Without Walls. They're doing kind of an interprovincial service. We're going to do some interprovincial Holy Week reading services. Great. And we're going to do some readers theater, which will be nice. So we'll have voices, right? We'll be acting out the Holy Week readings. So, I might get to read Jesus, and Marie can read Pontius Pilate, and I think it'll be different, and it'll be interprovincial, and we'll still be able to use the songs because Mike has all the songs, right? So honestly, in a lot of ways, it's exciting what we're doing here, even while it's frightening and scary.
I have a Holy Week manual that, I don't know, maybe some might remember Jackie Botter. She color coded all of the parts. So, Jesus is in red, and Pontius Pilate is black, and, she underlined, highlighted, so We always did that kind of reading for Holy Week.
That's great. Yeah, we actually have the resource. I think it's based on something Christy Clore did. I saw her briefly here earlier. But yeah, it's a script, and we're excited about it because we do think for some churches, you know, who just don't have the bandwidth right now, emotionally or actually, to have their own Holy Week, they can participate with this,
That'd
and I
be
think it'll be really nice. So
I'm working on a Sunday school teacher training 3-part series that I'm going to do on Zoom. So
great.
Wonderful.
I'll share some Easter ideas with that too. So that should be up right there next week.
That'd be great, Marie. And once you have those recordings, if you can share them with us, we'd love to put them on our family resources page. That'd be great. Marie does Christian education for the Eastern District of the Northern Province.
And you both are simply wonderful.
Thanks, Carol. All right. Well,
Thanks.
I don't want to keep you, but hopefully this was helpful. And again, we're available individually as we can to help you work through your specific context that you're working in. So